What if it could be different? What if we could create a new normal where we reclaim our time, our health and well-being?
Food, medicine, education and leisure, all within a 15-minute walk or cycle. The idea of 15-minute cities has spread to Paris, Melbourne and South Korea, attracted by the promise of lower car use and a better quality of life. But it's also become the focus of conspiracies that travel outside these neighbourhoods would be restricted, a sort of climate lockdown.
But thanks to COVID and COVID lockdowns, the truth was revealed that we're all apparently clamouring for these 15-minute cities.
Creepy local authority bureaucrats would like to see your entire existence boiled down to the duration of a quarter of an hour.
You in your area will only be allowed within that 15-minute zone that you've been allocated.
Echoes of that language have recently been heard in the House of Commons.
Will the leader please set aside some time in this House for a debate on the international socialist concept of so-called 15-minute cities and 20-minute neighbourhoods?
Disinformation researchers say this all started with the pandemic.
So the idea of climate lockdown first appeared in March 2020 when news of the lockdowns in Wuhan as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic first broke into international news. And the terminology came from a set of accounts in the US who were linked to a fossil fuel think tank called the Heartland Institute. Really, it was a reframing of very old vocabulary that imagines this future of so-called climate tyranny or green tyranny, where individual civil liberties are stripped away under the pretext of solving climate change.
At the time, it gained almost no traction. But months later, a number of mainstream institutions used the efforts to tackle the pandemic as an example of the scale of what would be needed to fight climate change.
As soon as that happened, it really turbocharged this very divisive and polarizing rhetoric that pitted average people against these perceived elites.
It is about control. It is about surveillance.
15-minute cities have been drawn into this narrative of insidious control. In the UK, one particular target has been Oxford, where misinformation has recently led to councillors receiving death threats.
We have been receiving many calls and emails from worried residents in genuine fear that they might be locked in their own homes.
The reality here in Oxford is distinctly different. The conspiracy has conflated two plans. One long-term intention to spread facilities among neighbourhoods, and one traffic restriction trial due to be brought in next year, which will use cameras and a permit system to track car journeys among certain roads across the city and potentially fine people if they use them too often. There are, of course, legitimate questions as to how these schemes are implemented.
This is a traffic filter, and there will be 6 more of these rolled out around the city.
Businesses, for example, reliant on drive-through trade.
It's very much a message to visitors and shoppers, people visiting our hotels and restaurants, that Oxford is not accessible and you have to stay out of Oxford.
Oxford has included multiple exemptions from the scheme, including for businesses, carers and blue badge holders. Visitors will of course be able to travel by other means, including public transport, or drive around the ring road to avoid the filters. But criticism has also been levelled at the way the proposals have been communicated.
There were no great efforts for everybody in the city to be made aware of what's happening, and some people still don't actually know what's happening. You can see why certain people turn to conspiracy theories.
The council say they've been consulting on the idea since 2019. There is a wider point in all this, though. Behavioural change is seen by many experts as a crucial part of achieving the UK's legally binding climate targets. The UK's Climate Change Committee has, for example, urged the government to create plans to reduce demand for air travel and help change people's diets. This recent concern and conspiracy shows how these kinds of policies are communicated may be central to their success.
What we find in research is actually if you're completely transparent about nudges, so about the idea that some policy proposals are designed to change people's behavior and what the government thinks are positive ways, if you actually state what the goals are of the nudge, be transparent and honest about it, it doesn't reduce the efficacy of those types of initiatives at all.
When it comes to the future of travel, though, disinformation has already taken root.